Let's be honest. If you're a young student graduating college or just starting your career, it's tougher out there than it's ever been. The world is simply more competitive, more distracting, and more disconnected than ever before. What's worse is the social media has you feeling like you're supposed to have it all figured out. But nobody gave you the playbook. They taught you grammar and history in school, but they didn't teach you resilience, entrepreneurship, how to navigate the politics of the real world. They didn't teach you how to build a real powerful network from scratch. And definitely didn't teach you how to handle failure. I'm Anthony Scaramucci, and I'm here to share my experience with you, the lessons I wish I learned in school. I've spent over 30 years on Wall Street, and I've made every mistake you can imagine. I was arrogant. I failed the bar exam twice. My ego cost me my job at the White House in front of the entire world. I've been on top of the world, and I've also been a caricature on SNL. This course is the sum of those mistakes. It's 30 years of scar tissue. So you can skip the failures that I made and learn from my mistakes. These principles are the head start you need. They are the mentorship you've been looking for. This isn't theory. This course will introduce you to the foundation for the rest of your career. Let's get to work. Module 1, the foundation for an unbeatable mindset. Foundation principle number 1 is having an unbeatable mindset. That doesn't mean you wake up perfectly every day and super joyous, but it means that you're building the habits for resilience. Some of it's gratitude, some of it's understanding and accepting volatility in life. And the third thing is building your self-confidence. I didn't start out super self-confident. There were days in my career, in my early 20s, when I got up and said, oh my God, how is that person even going to listen to me? Who am I to provide him or her with that advice? But over time, slowly, you build the building blocks of comprehension, you build the building blocks of commercial instincts, and you build the building blocks of trust. This is sort of the unbreakable mindset that you need to get people to trust you. I've been in the money management business for 37 years. Just think about that. I've got to convince somebody money is a lot of different things to people, but there's a psychological bond that people have with their money. And yet I have to convince them that they can trust me to be their fiduciary and take care of it for them. A lot goes into that. We're going to discuss what and how. Look, in order to cultivate that trust, it starts with an unbreakable mindset, but it also has elements of vulnerability to it. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss how to be vulnerable to other people, where they can see your humanity, they can see your identity, in addition to your skill set and your competence. Ultimately, we have found over thousands of years of human interaction, reciprocity and trust are the two big drivers of influence and passion and intimacy in a relationship. Lesson number 1, the joy is in the process. It's actually not in the destination. And so many years ago, I was a young kid. My grandfather loved to play bocce. We were old school Italian Americans, and he was laying out how to build a bocce court. And I had to get the roller out, and I had to get the sand mixture right. And then we had a 1/4 inch stone that we put down over the sand. And I wasn't doing it properly. And every once in a while, I get a slap on the head from my grandfather to remind me that process in life is everything. This is true not only in building a bocce court, but it's also true in building a customer list. It's true in building a business. You need a process. You need to build habits of success. What makes an unbreakable mindset is not the fact that the world isn't going to try to break you, because of course the world is going to try to break you. Think about all the trials and tribulations in life. It's almost like we come in with a package of things that all human beings have to deal with. If you go to the ancient Greek theaters, there was a happy face, which represented comedy. It was a mask of a happy face. And there was a mask of a sad face, which represented tragedy. And the philosophy from the ancient Greek dramatists was to tell you there's going to be parts of your life that are comedic and parts of your life, unfortunately, that are tragic. You have to imbue all of those things into your spirit to make yourself more resilient. You have to expect these things in life. You can't say, whoa, what is me? How is that happening to me? A death or an illness or an unfortunate circumstance. You have to embrace those factors in your life. And that's the real pathway to an unbreakable mindset. You know, the number one thing I try to tell people is to really pick something that you love. If you pick something that you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. I have a young son that's in the film industry. All he wants to do is make movies and think about movies. And he's doing it for his life. Will he make great money? Let's hope so. But he may not make great money because he's on the pathway of an artist. But when you find that artistic expression in your personality, that's when you're living your true life. I just happen to be a capitalist, but I see myself as a capital artist. I'm using my creativity and I'm using my ideas and my passion, and I'm converting them to something that I really love, which is understanding businesses. And so I chose Wall Street because Wall Street is the business of understanding other businesses. In your heart, you know something about yourself that's true to yourself. Don't listen to your mom or dad. Don't get swayed by a guidance counselor or a professor. What is in your heart? I have typically found that people from the ages of 11 to 17, they're doing something pure that they really like to do. So for me, it was trading baseball cards and trading comic books. I converted all of that energy into security analytics. For my son, he was making stop-action Lego videos. He went on to become a movie producer and a movie director. My daughter, turns out she loved to sing. She got voice lessons and singing lessons and is now on the path to being a professional singer. The point that I'm making is you've got to find something that you really love. And if you do that with your life, you'll always be passionate. You'll always be lit up. And your day will get started with gratitude that, oh, wow, I'm doing something I really love. I don't have the drudgery that others feel by sacrificing something for what they see as a false sense of security. So let's talk about optimism. I come from a family of immigrants. And trust me, when you're from a family of immigrants, you got a lot of pessimism in there because when people get to the country, a lot of bad things happen. And so imbued in the personalities of the Scaramuccis was levels of pessimism. But I tell people you can convert that. I once read a book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. This book was written about 33 years ago, and it's a brilliant exposition about how you can train your mind to be optimistic. Now let's talk about optimism versus pessimism. Optimism is about leadership. Optimism is about inspiration. Pessimists sometimes sound smarter than optimists. They sound more cynical than optimists. But typically when you do a psychological survey, when people heard the word pessimism or they hear or listen to pessimists, there's a level of distrust. Optimism, think of Morning in America. Think of a bright future. I sometimes tease people and say, listen, I'm too short to see the glass anything other than half full. It always looks half full to me when I'm looking up at the glass. You can train yourself to be optimistic. In the morning when I wake up, in addition to my gratitude list, I say, okay, what things are going to go right for me in my business? And I write them down. And by the way, if they don't go right, then you go into the adaptation phase, of course. Can't expect everything to go right. But what you can expect from yourself is that you're going to have a can-do, I believe in myself, I believe in my team's attitude in terms of approaching the problems that you have in life. But optimism, optimists live longer. Optimists are brighter and have less tendencies towards depression. And optimists typically, and this is the most important thing I'm going to say in this course, in any of the modules, optimists don't play the victim. Something bad happens, they say, okay, that's fine. You know, Ronald Reagan once told a story about a young boy who, there was a huge pile of horse dung in a stable, and he was shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. Finally, the stable manager came over to the young man and said, what are you doing? You've been shoveling horse dung for the last hour. He said, sir, I figure with all this horse dung in the stable, there's got to be a pony underneath there somewhere. Okay, the point being is that wasn't a pony there, but the mindset was there for that belief. And you can do this for yourself. You just have to develop the habits. You've got to train yourself to do this. I think this is a very important point. You can start out as a pessimist. You know, if you see somebody on television that's exuding optimism or positivity and you're saying, okay, that could never be me, that's not true. You can train yourself to be an optimist. It starts with a gratitude list. It starts with feeling good about yourself in the morning and getting some really good routines together. And it starts with writing down and manifesting what you want your life to be. So I believe one of the big hallmarks to optimism is incrementalism. I don't look at my day and say, okay, I've got to go from point A to point Z. Let me get immediately to point Z. I look at my day and say, okay, I'm here at point A. How do I go from point A to point B? How do I go from point B to point C? My point is, if you take life in bite-sized chunks, it's more achievable. The Navy SEALs, they always teach each other and they say, well, how do you eat an elephant? And the SEAL's response is one bite at a time. And so true optimists understand that if they look at the whole picture, it could be overwhelming. But if they look at each incremental bite of the picture, it's very surmountable. It's very doable. You know, there's sometimes I look at my forward schedule. I say, okay, wow, that's too packed for me. I'm not even going to focus on it. Let me just focus on today and getting through today and being my best. And I found if you string a number of good days together like that, lots of great things happen. One of the most famous Chinese philosophers from several thousand years ago is Lao Tzu. Now, Lao Tzu had a line, and I am paraphrasing this, but it's important for you to hear it. Lao Tzu had a line, if you think too much about your past, you'll end up depressed. Because what happens is you've made decisions in your past that you've regretted. There's been forks in the road. You went left, and now you're double thinking that perhaps you should have gone right. And so what happens is if you think too much about the past, you can end up depressed, according to Lao Tzu. Moreover, if you think too much about the future, you can end up anxious because anxiety comes from not knowing what's coming. And this is a very, very important philosophical tenet from the East, but it's also captured in Western philosophy through Stoicism. The Stoics will tell you, memento mori, in this moment, in this hour, I could die. A result of which, why am I going to take myself that seriously? Or in the immortal words of Mel Brooks, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. And so if you can dial into the present, not worry about a future illness, not worry about a future family dilemma or a corporate drama, but just today. You're here today, you're breathing, you've got air in your lungs, and you've got oxygen in your brain, and you have opportunity before you. If you can just focus on today and make today a great day, it's a building block for your future. You will train yourself to worry less if you take each day in steel-tight compartments. So there's lots of ingredients in this equation, but one of them is cultivating joy. That is living in the present. It's getting that Starbucks coffee in the morning, or maybe it's your favorite cereal or your favorite meal, or maybe it's going for a walk in a park. Whatever it might be that gives you joy, do it. Okay, it's about living in the present and focusing your energy on what you can do today, not having it wander into the future or wander into the past. And last but not least, but certainly as important as the others, is having a great perspective. You've got to sit there in your mindset and believe that good things are going to happen for you. And here are the steps you're going to take to have those good things happen. In August of 2022, I was on my knees. The stock market was doing poorly. The Federal Reserve was raising interest rates, and Bitcoin, something I'm a big believer in, was crashing. And I took out a piece of paper in my home study, and I said, okay, this is very bad. I'm getting fired by clients. Some of the wirehouses have put a sell recommendation on my fund. This is a very bleak situation. How am I going to turn this around? And I took out an index card, and I wrote down all of my personal assets, my skill set, my ability to go into a meeting and impress people, my ability to persuade somebody to our point of view, My network. I listed all the people in my network that could potentially help me during this business crisis. And I put it on a little card, and then I wrote down specific goals. I'm going to get to this amount of money once I get through the crisis, to make sure I have a certain amount of savings packed away. I'm going to make sure that I cut our firm's expenses down to the bone, so that when the crisis is over, if we could make some money, the profitability of the business would soar. Put it all down on a piece of paper, and I hid it in my desk. That's 3 years ago. I went into my desk. It's now August of 2025. I went into my desk and read what I wrote. And this is the most important point of the story. There was manifestation in those words. Did I get everything right? No. But I wrote 5 things down that I wanted to achieve. I think I got to 4 of them. And the point being, you can do this, but you've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to fight through the pain, however excoriating that pain may be. And one of the big lessons about all this stuff is your own self-image and your self-consciousness is really just about yourself. Nobody cares. I'm 61 years old. I wish I could have learned this at 16, but nobody cares. Nobody cares about you. Nobody's focused on you. You know what they're worried about? They're worried about themselves. They don't care about you. Okay, and if you can dial into what's important for you, irrespective of what you think other people think of you, you're going to do unbelievably well. Said differently, what other people think of you is none of your business. Practical exercises for building an unbeatable mindset. Exercise number 1, this is called the pre-meeting presence drill. So this is a very tough thing to do now in the age of technology, but you can do this. And if you do this, you're going to separate yourself from 99% of the other people. It's a simple thing. Put your phone away. Put your phone away. Don't even bring it into the conference room. When you're preparing to meet a super important client, bring a notepad, bring a pen, bring your PowerPoint presentation if you have one. But if you don't have one, just bring a notepad and a pen. Sit with the client, listen to the client, explain what you want from the client, get your feedback, and have an exercise in your mind that you're going to write down one thing about the client that you're noticing in the meeting, or something that you've learned from the client that will force you to be present in the meeting. Exercise number 2, the perspective shift question. Maybe something's not going your way with your boss or your client, or maybe you've been on a few sales calls that have gone flat and you can't reach your sales quota. Things like that happen all the time. Batters in baseball get a slump. Shooters in basketball start missing shots. It does happen. What's always recommended to do is to change your perspective. So dial back into what you're doing. Maybe you need to start the meetings earlier. Maybe you need to take meetings later. Maybe you need to find something different, or bring a buddy of yours from your office with you to the next meeting. Have them make an observation of what you're doing. Always shift your perspective. Always think about what the client needs first, and angle yourself that way. If I got to sell something to somebody, how would I think that person would want to be sold? And typically the answer is, what does the person need? You may or may not have what the person needs, and it's for you to figure that out. And then, of course, once you get that information, see if you can find something in your stable of products to deliver upon. So if it's not going your way and you're getting a series of no's, or there's resistance to a proposal, a screenplay, a sales pitch, and you're getting a lot of no's, find out why. Do the homework, do a little bit of an autopsy, and figure it out. It could be you, or frankly, it could be the people you're prospecting. You just may not be prospecting in the right place. I always tell people there's productive work and there's make work. If I start with the phone book and go to letter A, I could call people interminably. I call them for 24 hours straight, but I'm not calling the right people. Change your perspective and get to the right target-rich environment is sometimes a way to help you push through some of the blackout periods. Module number 2, how to build a reputation of steel. This is one of the axiomatic facts of your professional life. You, that's right, you're the brand. You're the entity. Even if you're working in one of the largest, most successful corporations in the world, you're building your own personal brand. You're cultivating how people perceive you, and you're cultivating how people see you as a professional. It's very, very important to understand this. Certainly, you want to be a teammate. Certainly, you want to integrate yourself into whatever project it is that you're working on. But remember, you yourself are the brand. And so you need to think about brand management and brand awareness. These are simple things, but they're very hard to put into practice. How do you manage your brand? Well, the first thing you have to do is manage your ego. The second thing you have to do is take responsibility for things. But the third thing, and this is the most difficult thing for most people. You ever heard of imposter syndrome? Some people walk into the job and they feel, oh, geez, I'm just not up for this, or I can't believe I'm in this position. I don't deserve to be there. That's nonsense, by the way. Okay, you deserve to be there just as much as anybody else, and you have to reinforce that into your personality. By the way, most people are thinking about that. So let me give you a little bit of an insight. Let me give you a little cue about life. If you're thinking that way in terms of your personal security, guess what? Most people are thinking that way. So just imagine if you could cross over into the land of personal security, where you believe in yourself and you're not worried about what other people think of you. If you can get there, manage your ego and take personal responsibility, you're going to be well ahead of the game. So let's talk about having an ego. So we all have one, and I'm not saying that you should totally vanquish it. I'm not asking you to be a Buddhist monk. Okay, that's one of the ideas about creating full ego death. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is put your ego in place. Somebody like a David Coggins, for example, would say to you that you're a nobody. He said, well, what do you mean I'm a nobody? Well, of course I'm a nobody. There's 8 billion of us, so you're really not that important. Number two, you could start thinking about yourself in a certain way that is in overdrive. Sometimes people that are insecure actually act overconfident or borderline into arrogance, which is very dangerous. And then they start overpromising things, or they start thinking that they can deliver things that they actually can't deliver. So this is about managing your ego. It's not about ego death, but it's about putting your ego in the right place, particularly when you're making decisions. You know, I've made some really bad decisions in my life. One of them was to go work in the White House. Ultimately, it was the wrong job for me. I wasn't experienced in that job, but my ego was talking to me. My self-narrative was, I grew up as a blue-collar kid. I went to some fancy pants schools. I got into the salons of the investment banks and the world of asset management, and I started to believe my own BS. And so when I took that job, it was based on ego. I wanted it to fit and fill a narrative for myself, even though it wasn't the right job for me. So I always tell people, you got to take your ego and your pride out of different situations. Moreover, you can tell the most confident people are the ones that are listening to others. Your ego makes you talk more than you want to, frankly. You know, remember your grandmother, somebody told you, you got 2 ears and 1 tongue for a reason. You should be listening twice as much as you're talking. But your ego makes you want to talk more than you actually should. So we know the most confident people in the world are the ones that are willing to listen. The most confident people in the world are the ones that come into the room and say, you know what? Every person in this room is somebody that I can learn from. Why? Well, they have a different life experience than me. Maybe they have a higher IQ than me. Maybe they have less of an IQ than me. What difference does it actually make? You're going to learn something. So remember, your ego is going to get you talking when you should be listening. Your ego is going to get you thinking, well, I'm smarter than the person next to me. You may or may not be smarter than the person next to you. Moreover, I learned a very long time ago that I can learn something from everybody. Why is that? Well, let's face it, everybody's got a different life experience. Everybody's got different parents. You don't have to just learn from high IQ people. People could have lower IQs than you, but still have insight into the world or still have a perspective. Moreover, I grew up with a family of masons. My father was a crane operator. When my grandmother got to the United States in the 1920s, she ended up as a maid. She was turning beds in people's houses. And by the way, she was an incredibly smart person. Once I was at Harvard Law School and I was listening to a young, arrogant kid opine about something. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, you know what? There are sheetrock installers in my neighborhood that I grew up with. They're actually smarter than you. But their father, guess what the father does? Their father happens to be a sheetrock installer. So they didn't get your life experience, or they didn't get your chances in life. And the point that I'm making is be humble. Be humble enough to learn from others. Be humble enough to listen. Even if you think you're smarter than somebody, you're going to learn something. And so managing your ego is one of the best things you can do in terms of cultivating your brand, because what happens when you're managing your ego, you're magnetizing yourself to others. Other people will want to be with you. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've made a tremendous amount of mistakes in my career. I remember one day I was at a cocktail party. I had just started my first business, and I was at a cocktail party of former Goldman Sachs people. And this one very industrious guy that was working at Goldman Sachs, he said something, and I listened to it, and I said, wow, how should I interpret this? And I'll tell you what he said. He looked over at his wife, and he said, you see, I have not had as many failures as Anthony has. And I thought to myself, wow, why is he saying that? And then it dawned on me that he was a little insecure about the risk-taking that I was taking in my life compared to his life. And the point that I'm making is that I was willing to take the risks. I was willing to deal with the pain and the self-consciousness of those shortcomings or those failures. And then guess what happens? As you get a very high profile, you end up getting high profile failures, meaning when I did something stupid in business, it ended up on the front page of the New York Post business section, as an example, or even on Bloomberg.com, the internet channel. I mean, I can't tell you the number of clicks. They call me failure clickbait. I do something really stupid. The journalists will write about it, and boom, it goes right up to the top of the impressions that are being made on the internet that day. Well, how are you going to handle that? Are you going to be a big baby about that, or are you going to own that? And this is a lesson that you need to learn immediately. Own it. You know, when I failed the bar exam, I was embarrassed. Why did I fail the bar exam? Arrogance. I said, wow, I never failed an exam before. What do you need to pass the New York State bar? A 66. Okay, well, I'll do that. I ended up skiing. I was water skiing on Manhasset Bay most of the summer while my friends were studying. I was arrogant, self-important, and self-centered. And so guess what happened to me? I failed the bar by one multiple choice point. Can you believe that? I missed one multiple choice question on the bar, and I got a 65.6. And guess what? New York State doesn't round up. I even went up to Albany to try to appeal the results, and they laughed at me, and the results stuck. And so I rushed and tried to take it again 6 months later, failed it again. And then 3 years later, I went to my boss at Goldman. I said, listen, I have failed the bar twice. I'm a finisher. I went to Harvard Law School. I've got to pass the bar. I would like to take, I know I have 2 weeks of vacation. With your permission, I'd like to take them back to back in the month of February so that I can retake the bar exam and finish what I started. So a lot of lessons in there. Accountability, being willing to finish something, being willing to own the mistakes that I made due to my arrogance. And of course, I dug in, and in February of 1992, 3 years after I graduated from law school, I was sitting for the bar exam in New York and eventually passed it. But there's a lot of lessons in there. One is accountability. Number two is perseverance. I didn't stop after I failed the bar. I was working at an investment bank. I didn't need to necessarily pass it. But for my mindset, and for me as a finisher, I absolutely needed to pass that. And I needed to send a message about my personal brand that I was going to be self-accountable, that if mistakes were being made, I was going to work super hard to correct those mistakes and reform myself. There's a tremendous amount of lessons in there for you. But the point being, it's okay to own your mistakes. Don't do this. Do not be the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. When bad stuff is happening to you, do this. Okay, yeah, it's me. I own it. Here's what I did right. Here's what I did wrong. And then go forward. You will be blown away at the positivity of that to other people, because people will look around and say, oh, wow, he owned that mistake, or she owned that mistake. It'll make you more trustworthy, and it'll help you in your career. Let's talk about personal security and insecurity. And so whether we like it or not, we are always going to be faced with some level of insecurity in our lives. There'll be somebody taller. There'll be somebody better looking. There'll be somebody smarter or more athletic. You pick the realm, you're not going to be the best at every single thing. And so you could, if you let your mind play tricks on you, you could start feeling bad about yourself and you could start to do a comparative analysis with others. I'm going to tell this story. It's a vulnerable story for me, but I will tell it. The first time I went to the World Economic Forum, I was 43 years old. And I walked into the room of first timers to the World Economic Forum, and in walked Mark Zuckerberg. And it turns out Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, now called Meta, I think at that time he was worth like $2 billion. I think he's worth $200 billion today. But you know how many billions of dollars I was worth? No $1 billion, okay? No $1 billion. And I walked into the cocktail party 20 years older than this very young, very bright man. And I started to feel insecure. I started to feel bad about myself. What did I do wrong in my life? And I went back to my little hotel room. One of the things about Davos, you have these like little 3-star hotel rooms. I think they do that to remind billionaires that they're human. Sort of like a humiliation ritual from Davos. But there I was in this like little 3-star hotel room, and I took out my notepad again and I started writing. And the revelation that I had is I didn't pick my life. I didn't pick my parents. I didn't pick my eye color. I didn't pick the location of my birth or the school system that I entered, K through 12. I also had this great blessing where I was born in the United States of America. And I started writing things down. And then it dawned on me, why make a relative comparison? Just focus on yourself and how to make yourself better. And the minute you do that, the voids in your personality go away and the security starts building where you're like, okay, I am me. I'm going to accept me for who I am. And so with that comes some self-deprecation. And by the way, when somebody is self-deprecating, psychologically, it's sending a message to other people that they're comfortable in their own skin. You know, there's been times, I think I had to speak to a group of basketball players once. I got up to the podium and I said, hey, for those of you that want me to stand up, I am standing. Okay, so they were all towering over me. And the point I was making, I was owning my height. I was owning who I was. I was fired from the White House after 11 days. If somebody says 10, I interrupt them. I said, geez, you know, you're really hurting my feelings. Why jet me out of that last day? I mean, it was 9.1% of my federal career. My point being, own yourself. Own who you are. Build yourself from the inside out. Don't look at the outside and make relative comparisons. When you do that, you become way more secure. One other very big tip. When you're in an office setting and somebody is talking badly about another person, that's a sign of their personal insecurity. Usually when people are rabble-rousing in an office or they're dirty griping other people, it's a relative game in their mind. They're trying to sink the other person to lift up themselves. You know, it's sort of like you're trying to dunk the other person underwater while you keep yourself afloat. Never do that. You don't need to do that. If anything, okay, that's a level of toxicity that you want to avoid. The best people, from a personal security perspective, the best people try to help the people around them. Think about a guy like Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter was never focused on his own results. He was never focused on his own statistics. He was focused on making the team better. You want to help your personal brand? Reach out to your colleagues at work, reach out to your coworkers and say, what can I do today for you to make your day better, your life better, or how can I improve your performance? That's a sign of personal security, and that will lead to exponential success. Another big sign of personal security is having the self-confidence to hear dissent. You know, when I was a kid, we used to read, I think it was in the first grade, I read The Emperor Has No Clothes. And I remember reading this at the age of 7 and saying to myself, my God, well, why did it take the young kid to tell the emperor that he was naked? Why didn't these other people tell the emperor that he was naked? And it's an allegory about fear, but it's also an allegory about ego. Sometimes we get people in leadership positions that have such fragile egos that they won't accept dissent. If they're doing something wrong or they're literally wearing no clothes, They're afraid to have somebody else say that to themselves. I have this in my office, and this is from Ronald Reagan's desk. This is from the desk in the Oval Office, 1981 to 1989. And what does it say here? It says, there is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit. That's personal security. That's somebody that's willing to take dissent. That's somebody to hire people that are smarter and more talented than they are. That's somebody that has game, somebody that has self-confidence. They're willing to have other people in the room to tell them what they're doing right or wrong, which will help improve them. Also, if you have personal security, you can delegate things. You've got the confidence in your spirit to let other people share the credit with you for the success of something. And this is the great irony about life. We want individual success. Well, that's true. But our human nature is such that we're social organisms, and it turns out that we need each other. You know, one thing Hillary Clinton did say that I agree with, it does take a village. It may take a village to raise a kid. It may take a village to make a business successful. It may take a village, for your own personal development and your own personal growth. So I've had some catastrophic mistakes in my career, but the one problem for me is I've had some very high profile things. So it's not like I just get fired. I got to get fired on national television. I get fired and be the headline on the broadsheet papers in 40 of the major global cities around the world. I got to get fired in such a spectacular way that I'm parodied on Saturday Night Live. I'm lit up by all the late night comedians, and I'm destroyed by all the cable news pundits. So when you talk about getting fired, on the 31st of July, 2017, I was blown through the front door of the White House, skinned alive, and then rolled in margarita salt. It was an absolutely miserable feeling. I'm not pretending otherwise. But there's two ways to go, and one is to regress and play the victim, and the other one is to go forward and own the situation and be able to laugh about the situation and run towards the situation. And so I remember hiring a few crisis PR people after my firing. And one of the people said to me, well, you should probably move to Tuscany. You just got fired. You've been globally humiliated. Well, you're a rich guy. Go move to Tuscany for 5 years and disappear. Come back into the United States sometime in 2022. Okay, I'm not doing that. Second idea was, well, face the music. Go on the different shows. Go on The View. Go on the Stephen Colbert Show. Go on Bill Maher and face the music and address what happened to you and actually own the mistake. And so I did that. And by the way, in the beginning, it was brutal. I'm not saying otherwise, but over time, I was able to carve out my identity and I was able to three-dimensionalize myself again. Because when you're fired like that and you're humiliated like that, you can get two-dimensionalized and end up as a caricature. And so this is a very big lesson for people. If it's not a health issue, it's unlikely that you're having as bad of a day as the day that I had on the 31st of July when I was fired from the White House. And you can get through it. And the way you get through it is by owning it. Now, years later, when I went into the cryptocurrency business, a lot of my clients thought I was mistaken to do this. I bought Bitcoin at about $20,000 a coin in November of 2020. And of course, it shot up to $69,000 in November of 2021. And so a lot of my clients thought I was a genius and they were praising me. And then I went from genius almost immediately to dunce because the ensuing year, Bitcoin dropped from 69,000 to 16. And because of my high profile, I was getting destroyed. And so the New York Post put me on the front page of their business section, sinking. I mean, looking like Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones, all shrunken down and sinking in the SS Mooch. Now, I wish I had that many Bitcoin, by the way, but there I was sinking, and they were writing a financial obituary of me. So what did I do? I took the picture, the composite from the New York Post, and I framed it and I put it in my office. And my attitude was, okay, if they're right and I'm going to zero, well, it'll be a nice memento of the day that the New York Post got something right and I got something very wrong. But if they're wrong, it'll be a very good laugh gag in the office. Of course, we've got comedians here at SkyBridge, and they made this rendition, this bobblehead doll. But I do love the hair on the bobblehead doll. And look in the back here. No bald spot in the back. See that? Okay, so point being is own your mistakes. Don't take yourself that seriously. It's not a health issue. You can survive just about anything. Module 2, practical exercises on building a strong reputation. So I call this one the responsibility rehearsal. And that is when you sit down and mistakes are happening, you're accountable and you're practicing how to be accountable, because sometimes it's very unnatural. We often want to disclaim accountability or blame because we think it's going to hurt our careers, but it's actually the very opposite. When you tell people what's going wrong and you take responsibility, it's a sign of thoughtfulness and it's a sign of leadership. And so you want to rehearse these things in your mind. Look through what you're doing, identify the things that you think you're not doing well enough, admit to those, and seek help. You want to blow your boss's mind away, you pick up the phone and say, hello, sir or ma'am, I'm calling because I made a mistake regarding X. The minute you do that, they're going to jump to your help. So finally, here's my plan to address it. You call, admit the mistake, you explain why it went wrong, and then offer your boss a few suggestions. But then the flip side is turn it back. Say, what do you suggest? This is what I thought I did wrong. This is the outcome that happened. This is how I think I should change. But what are your suggestions? When you do that, you'll impress everybody in the room that you're accountable and you have high levels of self-awareness. Self-awareness is a sign of security and it's a sign of great leadership. Next lesson, this is what I call the ego check-in. And so before you walk into that important meeting, write on a tablet, ego, how do I protect myself from my ego in this meeting? How do I make sure I'm not over-talking? How do I make sure I don't feel insecure if there are super powerful people in the meeting? How do I make sure I'm getting what I want out of the meeting without overly flexing on people? You know, the best meetings are the ones when you're doing the most listening. It's counterintuitive, but it really does make sense. When other people are talking and they're talking about things that are important to them or important to themselves, when they walk out of the meeting, guess what? They think it was a great meeting. Learn that, practice that, check your ego at the front door before you walk into the conference room. Module 3, getting in the arena, the rules of engagement. So we talked about mindset and we talked about building your brand. Now let's talk about some of the tactics on how to implement these sorts of things. The first one I want to get to is called disciplining yourself. And this is in a myriad of different ways. And so the 4 cornerstones of discipline for me are exercise, ending procrastination, going the extra mile, and forcing yourself to get some sleep and some downtime. So trust me, the 4th one is as important as the other 3, could be even more important. You've got to build rest into the equation at all points in the equation so that you can think clearly. But let's talk about disciplining yourself, because this is super, super important to me. I believe that you got to work out, you got to do something physical, at least for 1 hour a day, 5, 6, possibly even 7 days a week. If you do exercise in the morning or at some point in the day, I have yet to meet a true pessimist or someone that's extremely depressed that spends an hour a day lifting iron, running on a treadmill, doing push-ups. Most of the people I come in contact with in the gym are generally upbeat. So your mind and your body are connected to each other. So one aspect of discipline is getting yourself in the gym and training yourself to do something physical. Second, super important aspect of discipline is ending procrastination. Because what procrastination really is, it's a fear-inducted strategy of the brain. See, we think we're going to fail sometimes, or we prey on ourselves and think that the worst could possibly happen. This has to do with the way our brains are set up. Don't forget this about your brain. It's an evolutionary organism. There's a cortex and then there's a neocortex. The front part of your brain where you get your conscious behavior and your sentience is really coming from the neocortex. And if you study the brain, it's about the width and height of 6 playing cards. Okay, that's all it is. It sits at the front of your brain. It's the new cortex, if you will, It's this evolution that probably happened over the last 100 years that gives you your level of consciousness and self-awareness. Everything else in the brain is quite atavistic, and so it's designed for survival, which is why we'll eat to the point of explosion, which is why we want to avoid pain and we want to absorb pleasure, which is why we sometimes get jealous because, let's face it, when somebody had a bigger cave than us 50,000 years ago, we went over there, hit the person in the head with a rock and stole the cave. Okay, but we don't need to do that anymore because we're living in a world of abundance. So you have to force your brain into this transcendent type of more sublime behavior. And so your impulses are going to be, I don't want to do this. I may fail at it. You've got to hit the override switch. You've got to say, okay, I got to get up and do it right now. I've got to finish writing the chapter. I got to finish the project. I got to finish proofreading the manuscript. I got to finish my sales calls. Okay, well, the sales calls may not be successful. So what? Every additional sales call from a probability statistics point of view, you're eventually going to get to a yes if you keep making the calls with great enthusiasm. You know, I tell my salespeople I want them to be 1 part woodpecker and I want them to be 1 part parakeet. I want them to be a parakeet explaining the idea with great enthusiasm over and over again, but I also want them to be a woodpecker. I want them to peck at the side of the skull of a person until the skull cracks open. And so the point I'm making is you can do this. You can discipline yourself to this, but you have to understand the way your brain works. Your brain wants pleasure. Your brain wants sugar. Your brain wants fat. You know this. Of course, we all know this. Is why we're all carrying a little extra weight on ourselves. But you can force yourself into overcoming the fear of failure, which is a great big point of procrastination. Second big part of this, as it relates to discipline, is you got to go the extra mile. 1%ers are 1% for a reason. 99% of the other people, they don't want to go the extra mile. What happens is you start feeling the pain. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're making calls into Asia. You got to make that 15th call. You can't stop at 10. Maybe you got to make a 16th call. The point being is that the 1%ers fight through the pain. The 1%ers fight through the fear of failure. The 1%ers, something's going wrong for them. They don't drop the plate, the hot plate. They pick it up. Maybe they get themselves a pot holder. They hold it over the stove for a little bit longer than the 99%. This is a very important concept for you to understand. The pain is there to screen out the weaklings. Let's just face it. That's what it's there for. And you have to say, I recognize the pain. I can deal with the pain. I can overcome the pain. That's self-discipline. Self-discipline with eating. Self-discipline with exercise. It's self-discipline with job performance. They're all embedded inside of each other. Second part of this module is taking calculated risks. Now, I've taken some uncalculated risks in my life too. I'll give you an example. I thought I was a genius at age 27. I was buying call options in biotechnology stocks. Now, am I a biotechnologist? No. Do I have a major or a minor in chemistry, biochemistry, or biology? No. But for some reason, I thought I was a genius in biotech stocks. You know why? Because some of us sometimes confuse a brain with a bull market. The market was going up for these stocks, and so therefore I thought I was an expert. So I bought this stock called Centocor. They were making a drug to treat sepsis, and the first laboratory results, the first stage results were quite promising, and I bought the call options, and the call options zoomed up. And so I thought for sure they were going to get phase 2 trial approval, but they failed at phase 2, and the stock cratered, and I was left with a big divot, a big hole, big loss in my personal account. It was a very big $50,000 lesson for me. 35 years ago, $50,000 was a lot of money. It still is today, but I'm saying it was monumental to me back then. But it was a very big lesson on taking calculated risks versus non-calculated risks and not actually understanding the risk. And so if you're going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to be a good business leader in a corporate environment, you've got to take some calculated risks. You've got to be willing to push yourself. You've got to be willing to push an idea. Maybe it's an idea that's outside the consensus. Maybe it's an idea that other people in your industry frown upon. One of the most recent ideas for me was moving a big part of my asset management company into the digital asset space. 5 years ago when I did that, people ridiculed me. People my age said I was misguided. They said I was stupid to go into digital assets. It's 5 years later, and the world is now adopting the digital assets. Lo and behold, some people are calling me prescient. Now, I obviously don't believe any of the good or bad press about myself. I'm just making the point that it was a calculated risk. I looked at the upside potential of what I was doing. I examined the downside potential. And I have been, over 35 years now, humbled by life and humbled by markets. So when I'm making decisions now, in my mind, I'm saying, okay, I could have this wrong. I could get this woefully wrong. What will happen if I have this wrong? Now, this is something that's going to contradict everything that I just said. You got to burn the boats. Because what's that analogy? You know, when the explorers got to the North American continent, what did the captains do? They set fire to the boats. Why did they set fire to the boats? Because they told the explorers, hey, man, no going back. Okay, so you got only one decision that you got to make. You got to make this thing work. No matter what happens, you got to go forward. So yes, you should examine the downside. I'm not saying you shouldn't before you actually make the risk-adjusted decision to pursue calculated risk. But the congruent to that and concomitant to it, you got to burn the boats. You made the decision, you're in digital assets, you got to stay in digital assets, and you got to make it work. Now, module number 3 is up against that module, which is that you sometimes hear from people that you never quit. You never quit under any circumstances, but I actually don't believe that. I think good entrepreneurs accept that sometimes they're going down the wrong road. They accept that sometimes they've got a product that isn't working, or they accept that they've got a business model that's not working, or they have to scrap a plan. SkyBridge Capital started as a hedge fund incubation company. Wasn't working. We weren't able to get the hedge funds up and scale. Then we went into the global financial crisis in 2008. I had a choice. I could shut down SkyBridge, or I could adapt and change the business model of SkyBridge. And I made a decision to scrap hedge fund incubation, even though that was the original idea of SkyBridge. I pivoted it into just more broadly fund to funds and hedge fund advisory and private equity investing. Blackstone, literally one of the largest alternative asset management companies in the world, one of the most successful asset management companies ever. It got started by a gentleman by the name of Pete Peterson and Steve Schwartzman. If you take their names, Peter means stone, Schwartz means black. They came up with Blackstone. But their original idea was to be investment bankers and to focus on M&A transactions. It wasn't working. They pivoted into the world of private equity, and they became the most successful, or one of the most successful, private equity franchises in the history of the world. So you have to know when to quit. When you listen to those aphorisms and you listen to those cliches, you know, winners never quit and all that other stuff, I'm not saying about quitting on life, and I'm not saying on quitting on a direction. SkyBridge is 20 years old today, but we've adapted and pivoted and frankly quit on a few businesses along the way. You have to be willing to do that. You got to get your ego in the right place to know when certain things are not working. One of the big things about executing a plan is in the follow-up. The most powerful word in the English language is literally 2 letters and it's 1 syllable. And we learn this word literally from the time that we can understand the language. No, right? Our mom tells us, no, don't touch the stove. No, don't put that stupid thing in your mouth. You'll choke and die. So we hear no, 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 and it freezes us. No puts us on the defense. And so when you're in business and you're trying to create activity for your business, or you're trying to create sales or convince somebody that your idea is good and virtuous and they need to invest with you, when we hear the word no, because of the ancestral nature and the ancestral relationship that we have with the word no, we have a tendency to freeze up. When I tease people, I say, well, maybe I'm dyslexic. No spelled backwards is on. When I hear the word no, my reaction is, okay, how am I going to get this person to yes? Maybe not today, but maybe into the future. And so everything that I'm saying to you is related to the discipline of follow-up. Someone says no to me. I turn to them and say, okay, well, this may not be the right product for you today. I'd love to keep a relationship with you. I believe I'm in the consultative sales business, meaning I'm going to have a product or an idea that eventually fits you. Maybe it never fit you. I'd like to keep our friendship. But turn yourself on when you hear the word no. Recognize also that selling and business is probability statistics. The more no's you hear, you're eventually statistically getting to a yes. So this is very, very important with follow-up. You have to believe that you're good enough. You have to believe that you're going to get these percentages right. And this is big analogy here, but pay close attention. If you're in baseball and you go 3 for 10, you bat 300, you're one of the top major leaguers. To think about business, you can go 1 for 1,000, meaning every at-bat doesn't matter. You can go 1 for 1,000 if in that one time you're actualizing and you're creating a great relationship or you're getting a big investment. The law of averages in business are way more with you than in any other part of your life because of the repetition. You can keep going, okay? And there's no judgment. No means no. Who cares? Go to the next person. Follow-up is everything in business, and follow-up is what's going to separate you from everybody else. Be disciplined enough to pick up the phone despite your fears and the self-consciousness of hearing the word no. The next lesson is what I call character is destiny. And there's a character is destiny test. Constantly in your life, you are going to be faced with moral dilemmas and moral crossroads. And let me tell you something, the temptation is there to fib and the temptation is there to do the wrong thing, but you've got to prevent yourself from doing that. And so one of the ways you do that is you workshop in your brain the good and bad things that could happen from your decision making. One of the most vivid examples for me is I once sold a piece of my business to somebody who ultimately was convicted of fraud. Did it hurt my business? Sure, it hurt my business in the short term, but long term it actually helped my business because I handled myself with high integrity and with great ethics throughout the whole experience. And I'm telling you right now, if you only learn one lesson from this very important program, is to maintain your integrity at all costs, because with integrity, you have unbelievable opportunities. There will be no limit to your opportunities in your life as long as you have a reputation for integrity. What does that really mean? When the pressure is on and there's a temptation to do something really bad, you always come up aces. You're always doing the right thing. Imagine if you had to explain your decision on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. If it makes your stomach turn, you know you're going in the wrong direction. But if they're writing something that makes you proud, well, then you know you're going in the right one. So the next lesson is called the time audit. And remember what I said earlier, that one of the most powerful words in the English language is no. But that's also one of the great superpowers that you have if you learn how to develop a way to say graciously no. Look in your schedule. What's in your schedule that's superfluous or unnecessary? Learn to say no to those things. I'm the worst at that, by the way. I'm a people pleaser. I want to do the right thing by people. I want people to feel good about me. But sometimes that's going to hurt my short and long-term goals. So do a time audit. Look at what's going on in your career. If you get emails from people that you can easily unsubscribe to them, guess what? Unsubscribe to them. If you're getting ideas or information or potential meetings that really have no value to you personally or professionally, you got to be brave enough and you got to be conflict-oriented enough to say no. Do a weekly time audit. It'll be super valuable and it'll free up a lot more time than you would think. In addition to productivity and scheduling as it relates to time audits, let's face it, we're spending too much time on our phones. Average person is spending 5 to 6 hours a day on the phone. And a lot of people use that alibi excuses. I'm doing it from work. But you know and I know it could be an hour, 2 hours on things like X or Instagram. Try to shorten it. You'll be less distracted in life. And it'll free up your time. And time is your most valuable asset, way more valuable than money. You can always figure out a way to make money. Unfortunately, we can't figure out a way to make more time. The next lesson is the follow-up list. And some of us are good starters, but we're not great finishers. So how do you do that? You put a follow-up list together, okay? Look at your call sheet. Look at the incoming calls, look at the outgoing calls, look at the potential prospects, look at the process. If you're a process engineer, look at the tasks that are before you. How do you follow up? Let's say you're building a house and you can't get the subcontractor back, who's the electrician, to put up the light fixtures and so forth. What are you going to do? Who are you going to call? How do you stay on people? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. We all know that. So make sure you have a follow-up list and make sure you take it seriously. Module 4, building up your relationship capital, how to build a super powerful network. Relationships are obviously your most valuable asset. And so if you want to think about your life, your intellectual capital is way more valuable than your capital. Because remember, your capital, God forbid, if it's taken away from you, you still have your intellectual capital and all of your personal resources to grow it back again. Intellectual capital is super important. And so therefore, what makes your human capital or your intellectual capital exponential? It's the attachment of others. It's building a network for success, a network for growth, and a network for opportunity. And so there's lots of different layers to this. The number one thing you should be thinking about always is the context of your personal brand. So what do brands have, or what do corporations have? They have a board of directors. So you too need your own individual board of directors. There's got to be 5 or 10 people that you are super tight with. Maybe it's an old boss. Maybe it's a young mentor. Maybe it's a family friend. Maybe it's a school friend. It doesn't really matter, but it's people that are close to you, that you're intimate with, that can tell you the truth about your life and vice versa, that can provide guidance, that can say harsh things to you that you won't take as harsh, but you'll take as constructive. And so the first thing I always think about is who's on my board. And that board can be interchangeable as you grow. You know, you could put people on the board, take people off the board, but you have to have a core group of people that you're close to that can always be honest with you, that you can leverage off of, but they can also leverage off of you. If there's a favor needs to be called in from you, you're Johnny on the spot, ready to do it. So that's core principle number 1. The second core principle is what I call the triangle of good relationships. Okay, so let's start at the top of the triangle. The first piece of the triangle is vulnerability. So the top of the triangle is vulnerability. You say, well, what do you mean by vulnerability? Well, I will tell you time and time again in human life, if you're vulnerable to another person, you're opening the door for a deeper relationship. We can be very mechanical in business. I can pick up the phone, I can read you the selling memo and try to sell you on the idea, or I can be interpersonal with you and I can provide a window into my own life. Studies have found that the more vulnerable we are to other people, the more willing we are to share our humanity, our foibles, our ups and downs, the more willing another person is to engage with you. Sometimes dropping the veil or the shroud of formality and being more vulnerable with a person is a winning solution to the second part of the pyramid. So down on the left side of the pyramid is the word trust. And so I firmly believe the more vulnerable you are with a person, the more human you are to the person, and the easier you are to relate to. And then, of course, that person can establish a bond of trust with you. And so what does trust come from? Ultimately, trust comes from comfort. Trust comes from reliability. And a big portion of trust is from integrity. If the person with you believes that you have high integrity, well, guess what's going to happen? They think you're going to do the right thing, even in the most difficult circumstances. And so I always tell people, I failed at many things. I've been embarrassed in business. I've had sometimes the wrong business partners. But I tell people, if you have integrity, you always have opportunity. And so even if you have a setback in your life, you picked the wrong person, you picked the wrong marriage, you picked the wrong business partner, you sold a piece of your business to somebody that turns out to be a fraud. Okay, that can happen. And by the way, that has happened to me. You can stay in business, you can stay vital, and you can continue to grow because you have integrity. Because people will look at you and say, okay, that person is willing to sacrifice money, or he's willing to sacrifice making himself look good for the sake of doing good or doing the right thing. So in the category of trust, be vulnerable, Show people that you have high principles and high integrity. And guess what happens? They'll start relating to you as a human being, and they'll start bonding with you. Last piece of this pyramid in terms of building a relationship is what I call karma. I don't necessarily mean the Eastern religious concepts of karma. I just mean doing the right thing and doing it in a non-linear way. You know, Ben Franklin had one of the most famous American aphorisms. He said, if you want to have a friend or you want to make a friend, ask the person for a favor. And it sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually quite logical because it goes back to our need for reciprocity. You know, there's a great book on influence written by a University of Arizona professor by the name of Robert Cialdini. He wrote a book called The Psychology of Influence, and what he found is that reciprocity is the engine for all of humanity, that reciprocity is understood on all 6 continents where there are human beings. If somebody does something good for you, you have a need or a want to return the favor and do something good for them. And I'm not saying every single person. Of course, there's a small percentage of the population that are wicked or asymmetrical or malevolent. But in general, if you do good things for others, guess what happens? Good comes back to you. I know it sounds cliche, but I just want you to think of the science of it. You put favors out into the world, people have a good feeling about you, and then they're willing to help you when you need help. So don't make it transactional. But karma is about non-linear positive behavior towards others with no expectation, but just the long-term idea that this will be very good for you. It came home to roost for me after I was fired from the White House. You know, I've seen public figures get fired. If they're malevolent on the way up the ladder, guess what happens? They don't get anybody calling them when they've fallen. And a lot of people snicker and say, well, he was a bad guy on the way up, and now nobody wants to help him on the way down. But when I got fired from the White House, I got a ton of phone calls. Lots of people called me, said to me, how can I help you? You've been good to me here. You've been good to me there. It's sort of that Jimmy Stewart situation in It's a Wonderful Life. You don't have to see the whole movie. I'm going to spare you all the details. But Jimmy Stewart's going through his life. He's doing some things that he likes, and he's living his life with regret, but he's always living with good-natured integrity and trying to help others. And then something really bad happens to him, and he gets desperate, and he's contemplating suicide. And down from heaven comes his guardian angel, and his guardian angel shows him what life would be like if he had never lived, and all of the different people that have helped him. In the meantime, as he goes back to real life, he discovers that all the people that were out there that he helped are now trying to help him resolve this problem. And it's a really good spiritual concept about doing the right thing for others, not with expectation that they're going to do good by you, but just by generating the karma. It's a way to build your brand and to exponentially expand your relationship network. So a lot of people make the following mistake. They want to talk to the principal, and they feel that the people below the principal are to be ignored or are insignificant. That may be the receptionist at the front desk or the principal's assistant or PDA. But the truth of the matter is everybody in the chain is super important. And I think people make a terrible mistake when they are flippant with other people, or they are condescending to people or patronizing. I do not recommend that. It's something that I live by. In fact, I can tell right away if someone's treating the receptionist at SkyBridge well, I know that I'm going to get along with the person. If they're not treating the receptionist well, or they think they're too important for the receptionist, chances are they'll never get a job here, and chances are I'm very much so not going to like them. And so I think it's very, very important. I always tell my kids, you are as good as anybody, okay? But don't think you're better than people, but never think you're worse than anybody. Treat everybody with respect and dignity and kindness. It'll come home to roost. You know, you want to meet the principal. One of the ways of meeting the principal is being nice to the assistant. Assistant will turn to the principal and say, hey, that's a good person. I talked to the person a few times. Give the person a shot. Give them an appearance. Let's see how they do. It's just good karma. There's a very famous rule. I learned it at Goldman Sachs. You may have already learned it, but it's called the waiter rule. And the story goes, you're out on your first date. Watch how the person treats the waiter, because the waiter is a one-off experience. It's not a long-term experience. And so what typically happens, if a person is mean-spirited, they could flip off the waiter or be mean or condescending towards the waiter. That's the way they're going to treat you in 6 months. Okay, it's a good sign. Healthy people treat people below them with great kindness. And it's just something to remember. And I will tell this story. When I left Goldman Sachs way back in 1996, due to my insecurities, I joined the Harvard Club. So why did I join the Harvard Club? Well, I went to Harvard. I figured if I join the Harvard Club, I can have breakfast with these different prospects. And because of my insecurity, I wanted people to know that I went to Harvard without me ever telling them that I went to Harvard. So I joined the Harvard Club and I invited people to breakfast. And lo and behold, there we were at the Harvard Club. And I was pitching them on the ideas of my new business. There was a gentleman that was working at the Harvard Club. His name was Joaquin. And he used to call me Mr. Anthony, and he treated me super well. He sometimes waited on the table. He sometimes bussed the table. And of course, I'm very mindful of making sure that I give generous tips to people. And 3 or 4 years into me soliciting client after client, prospect after prospect at the Harvard Club, Joaquin comes over to me and he says, Mr. Anthony. I said, yes, Joaquin. He says, I know that you manage money, right? You explained that to me once. I said, yes. He said, well, we had an accident. We had a personal injury situation in my family, and we just came into $35 million. And you seem like such a nice person, and you've been so good to me over the last 4 years. You're the only person I know that manages money. Would you be willing to manage this money for me? And there was the great irony of life. I was out there soliciting people, important people, rich people, all this sort of stuff. But the biggest prospect in the room was Joaquin with the $35 million. Now, I didn't have the right investment management products for Joaquin. And so I referred him to one of my colleagues and friends at Neuberger Berman, a firm I used to work for. And his money is still managed there today, 20 years later. It's grown to well over $100 million today. But just think about that for a moment. You're there prospecting, but the waiter may have more money than the prospect. In the process of all this, you're thinking about reciprocity. You're thinking about doing good and creating karma, being vulnerable, creating trust. But the thing that you got to always remember, though, don't burn bridges. There's no need to burn bridges. There's no need to hold grudges. I've repaired just about every relationship in my life eventually over time. There's no need. Let me tell you something. When you're angry, okay, that's the poison you're drinking, hoping that the other person dies. The other person could care less. Buddy Hackett once said, you're angry, the other person's out dancing. The person could care less. So don't be angry. Expiate all the anger from your personality. Learn that people can make mistakes with each other, and then they can repair and rebuild the relationship. Don't burn a bridge. I'm going to tell this story, and I'm not going to use names to protect the innocent. I was in the Goldman Sachs training class, and one of the slightly more senior, very competitive people, burnt me on a voicemail. He forwarded a voicemail that I sent to him to somebody else, and it was a sort of an uncouth, inappropriate. I was saying it as a joke, but when you heard it back on voicemail, it could have been totally misinterpreted, and he hurt my relationship with the person that he forwarded it to. Of course, I went and apologized to that person, but I think the damage was done. But this guy really got me, and he got me in the spirit of that sort of negativity and that spirit of insecure competition. Well, guess what? Lo and behold, he gets let go from the firm. Now he's looking for a job. And I get a phone call. Turns out that one of my friends at a competitive firm is going to hire this person, or is thinking about hiring the person. They call me up. They say, hey, I noticed you worked in this division at Goldman alongside of this person. What do you think of the person? I said, tell you what, let me call you back. I'm a little busy. I hung up the phone, and I picked up the phone. I called the person that lit me up at Goldman. He got on the phone, and I said, listen, XYZ from this firm that you are looking to get a job from just called me. But before I call him back, I'd like to have lunch with you or breakfast. Could I meet you tomorrow morning for breakfast? And he sheepishly said, yes, he would be willing to meet me. I had breakfast with him at the Harvard Club. And we sat there in the club and I said, listen, you burnt me really badly about 2 years ago. You know exactly what you did. I said, but I've already made the phone call last night to so-and-so, and I praised you. And I said, you would be a great potential candidate for that job, and he should consider hiring you. I did that because you're actually really very good at your job, but you were a little bit insecure, and you came after me hard for absolutely no reason. And this would be a lesson to you. Don't do that anymore. Okay, you and I should be friends. There's no reason for us to be fighting with each other. But you needed me in this moment. And if I was a different person, okay, I would have sought vengeance against you by saying bad things about you. But I didn't do that because, number one, it would hurt your family. It'd be no upside for me. And number two, I would rather have us build a bridge to each other and have a relationship than have a grudge. Very, very important lesson on emotional intelligence and how to run your life without burning bridges. So remember, you are who you surround yourself with. I often tell people that you're the weighted average of the 5 people that are closest to you. If they've got good instincts, they're disciplined, they're eating right, they're working hard, guess what's going to happen? You're going to pick up their vibe and their vibration. You're going to do the same thing. If they're doing drugs and they're lazy procrastinators, you're going to slip and slide into that zone too. So hang out with really good people. But more important, or as important to that, you got to make sure you hang out with people that are honest with you. There's been some periods in my life that I regret. Some of them are related, frankly, to the White House. I got too big for my britches. My ego was filling up unnaturally. My old boss, may his soul rest in peace, was a guy by the name of John Weinberg. He was the senior partner at Goldman Sachs. I used to be on his account as a servicing person in the asset management area, and he had one of the best lines ever. He said, some people grow, but other people swell. You got to be very, very careful in life that you don't swell, that you're constantly growing. But there was a point in my life when I went to go work in the White House where I was swelling. My head was getting too big, and I was getting a little bit too big for my britches, and I got called out by a few of my friends. Moreover, I got called out by some people that I really love, like close personal relationships like my wife. And you can either face the music and admit that you're doing something wrong, or you can reject that and hit the override switch of insecurity. But I'll tell you, if you do the latter and not the former, you're going to dig an even bigger hole for yourself. So rather than rejecting it, again, I went to the notepad. I said, okay, what am I doing wrong? How am I doing this? And how can I make myself better? How can I be reflective about the situation, honest about the situation, willing to admit the mistake, and open up a space in my heart and in my mind for additional growth? Hard to do sometimes, but very, very necessary if you want to get to the top of your game. An additional point as it relates to relationships, yourself, your family, your employees, your partners, I have an expression that I call tough nice. And what does tough nice mean? Michael Dell wrote a great book, a bestseller. The title of the book was Play Nice But Win. And what Michael was making the point of is that sometimes we have to be tough in business. We have to be tough negotiators, or sometimes we have to be tough as parents in terms of applying discipline to our children. Or sometimes, frankly, we have to be tough in a relationship to explain to somebody if the relationship is getting out of balance, whether it's a professional one or a personal one. You have to have the open conversation. You can't be a conflict avoider. If something's going wrong, you know it, the other person knows it. But if you pretend that it's not going wrong, guess what happens? It gets worse. You'd be better off having the conversation, and I call it tough nice. You always want to be a nice person. You want to be a gracious person, but you have to tell the people around you the truth. If your partners are not working, you got to tell them. You got to work harder. If your relationship's not going in a way that you want, the biggest mistake you can make is say nothing. Because if you really love the person, give the person a chance to correct some of the things that they're doing. And again, I'm not saying they got to change their whole personality, because then if that's the case, you guys shouldn't be together. But there could be things on the margin due to laxity or due to entrenchment that are not going right. And it's important for you not to be a conflict avoider. It's important for you to be tough nice. That's nice, but also tough, or tough and also nice. Practical exercises on building up your network and your relationship capital. This is called the 5-minute favor rule. You're going to do this every day for a week. You're going to find one person in your Rolodex to do a 5-minute favor for. It could be a restaurant reservation. It could be tickets to a ball game. It could be help finding a doctor. It doesn't really matter. It's just something that takes you a few minutes, that offers a gesture of goodwill in exchange for absolutely nothing to a person in your Rolodex. You trust me, it's an unbelievable exponential karma generator. Okay, this exercise is called the Great Connector. Multiple times a week, you're going to sit down and lay out a matrix where you're connecting people in your Rolodex that don't necessarily know each other. I'm telling you, this is a wonderful thing to do, because the best thing that can happen is they build friendships on their own, and it always relates back to you being the person that made the introduction. Module 5, taking the long view and building an unbreakable career. You already know this, but I'm going to restate it for emphasis and importance. Life is not a series of transactions. You never want it to end up that way. You want to build a life of meaning, and you want to build a life of purpose. And you want to build a life where you're waking up in the morning and saying, wow, I'm blessed. This is a good life. I'm doing something I love, and I love what I'm doing, and I'm going to get up tomorrow and do the same thing. And so the number one thing that you have to do is be self-honest. When you're looking for meaning in your life, you've got to be honest. If you're not honest with yourself, you're never going to hit the bullseye of meaning. And so let me be honest with you about me. I was always worried about money. When I was growing up as a kid, there was financial anxiety in the house. My dad's wages were a little bit like an accordion. When the economy was booming, he was an hourly crane operator. He had more wages. We had more things in the house. When the economy was contracting, well, guess what happened? He had less overtime, and there was a little bit of anxiety that crept in. I immediately went out and got myself a paper route. I think in 1976, I was making about $45 a week and giving 25 of that to my mom and dad to help supplement their budget. And in the process of that, I started to develop the habits of entrepreneurship, but also developed the habits about wanting some money for financial security. Because I'll let you in on a secret. It's a terrible secret for me to admit. But if I had all the money in the world, I didn't have that anxiety growing up, I probably would have went to Hollywood. Who the hell knows? I'm as short as Tom Cruise. I'm slightly taller than Robert Downey Jr., at least when I'm wearing my list. And I would have probably fit in well with these little rugrats. But I didn't do that because I was fearful. But I found a job that was meaningful to me by being on Wall Street. But the point being, I wasn't 100% honest with myself in the beginning, because I was really looking for a job that was going to cure the financial ills of the family, and I was going to seek some level of financial independence. What did I learn from that? Well, the first thing I learned is do something you really love. So for me, it was sales. Selling those newspapers to those Long Island suburban housewives was literally like a dream come true. I was knocking on doors, and some of these people knew my mom and some of them didn't, but I would figure out ways to guilt them into getting daily or Sunday subscriptions to Long Island Newsday. And I built myself a very nice paper route with a very generous sum of money paid to me at the end of the week. And I transferred those skill sets into Wall Street. So there's something you're doing. Okay, the legendary Byron Wien, he's now deceased, but he was a phenomenal investor. He was the head market strategist at Morgan Stanley. He went on to go work at Blackstone prior to his full retirement. He used to come up with all these wonderful predictions at the end of the year about what was going to happen in the coming year. But he said something to me that I'll never forget, and I'll share it with you. He said, typically somebody's doing something from the age of 11 to 17 that is their pure joy. You know what it is. I know what it is for me. I mentioned it earlier in one of the other modules. I love collecting cards. I love collecting baseball signatures. I love collecting comic books. I transferred all of that and all the analytics associated with that to Wall Street. You may have something. I don't know what it is, but you know what it is. Find that, do that, work that. If you do that, you're going to have a very, very special career because it's going to be personal and innate to you. So the number one thing is that you're not 1 in a million. Because if you were 1 in a million and there's 7 billion people, guess what? There's 7 million more versions of you on planet Earth. So we both know that that's not the case. So you're not one in a million. You're one of a kind. Never forget that. And there's a specialness and there's a uniqueness to you. Your life experience, how you were raised, even if it was a bad way to be raised, that's imbued in you, you could turn that into something positive. If it was a good way to be raised, make it exponential. But the point that I'm making is that there's only one you. Try your hardest to be you. You don't have to fit in. You know, I hate golf. All these people on Wall Street play golf. You know, I'm not a big tennis guy. I never swung a tennis racket as a kid. All these people are trucking over to the U.S. Open. Maybe I'm missing out. Maybe I'm not missing out, but I honestly don't care. You don't need to fit in. What you need to do is be you. You need to do you. And when you do you and you're expressing that authenticity to the outside world, people pick up on it. You know when you see somebody on television and they're blah, 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 blah with some talking points or bullet points from their comms person, it's a total snooze fest. You know when the person is engaged and they're talking from their heart or they're talking about something that they're passionate about, that they identify with. You pay attention more. You know, I call it the phone dropping person, right? You're in a public speech and someone's giving a public speech in a public setting and this is your phone. Look at me. Your phone's here. Are you looking at the guy? No, you're not looking at the right here. The phone dropping speeches are from the people that are talking from here. They're talking from their hearts. They're sharing with you a piece of their soul, and it forces you to drop your phone. You got to be that person to other people. And the way to do that is just be yourself. People know right away. Don't try to form fit into what other people think that you need to be. You need to be who you are. As we're building our brands and we're building ourselves, the greatest accelerant that I can offer you is reading. Mark Twain once said, if a person can read and doesn't read, they're no better than a person that can't read. But you can read. And if you can read, you now have channels into time and you have channels into the world. And you have a myriad of subjects that human beings, men and women, have been writing about throughout recorded history. If you want to read the great books of Eastern literature, well, guess what? There's a 5,000-year dialogue with some of the smartest people that have lived in the East to share their thoughts, philosophies, their ideas about science, their ideas about humans. Same thing with Western literature. There's books dating back to Homer. They go right through to the modern era, to Sigmund Freud and others. And there's a constant thread of conversation that you can pick up on. You can generate knowledge from all of these people that have lived before us. And think about the bounty that we have in life. I'm talking to you right now in a building that I didn't have to build. I'm talking into a camera. I did not have to make the camera. I'm going to travel on a road today that I didn't pave myself in a car that I didn't make myself. And by the way, that road and the concept of the combustion engine were made long before I was born. You have all of this bounty and you have all of these layers of exponential progress that have happened in human civilization, and you can tap into it. You want to learn about Einstein's relativity? Well, guess what? You can read about it in his own words. You want to learn about what happened, the trials and travails of Achilles in the Iliad? Well, guess what? You've got the whole book right there. And in that book, there's a great, wonderful exposition of human beings, how they relate to each other, what the emotional tracks are, and what the predictability is. You want to learn from a great inventor, somebody that understood the whole process of self-improvement, something that this entire show is about, frankly. You can open up the autobiography of Ben Franklin, and he comes to life. 250 years ago, he was walking around espousing his philosophy, but it's all there in Poor Richard's Almanac. It's all there in the autobiography of Ben. So read. You got to read everything. Don't just pick a few genres that you like. Stretch yourself. Read fiction, read nonfiction. I tell people that read fiction, some of the best fiction writers in the world know human beings. They know the internal mechanisms of how human beings think. And so when you're reading about these characters and they're coming to life, even though they're made up, you're getting into the mindset and the psychology of the way the author thinks about human beings. And so this stuff is a way to accelerate and exponentially grow your personality. And of course, the number one thing you need to have is the capability to teach yourself. You have to be autodidactic in life. There's a ton of books on the shelf behind me. There's tons of books in my office at home. There's tons of books in my set. Let me tell you something. I'm probably buying books 10 to 1 of what I can read, and I leaf through the others. There's always a fun story. There's always a piece of information or a nugget or an application of historical context to your current life. And so force yourself to read a myriad of different subjects. I used to tell people before inflation, for $10, you could get 10 years of experience from 10 hours of reading. It's probably $30 today, but you get the point. Force yourself to read. Get in a good habit. And by the way, people ask me, it's at least one book a week, and it's approximately 2.5 to 4 hours a day of reading, which includes audible books, listening in the car, potentially while I'm exercising. I have talked in more than one of these modules about manifestation. And I'm telling you right now, the legendary industrialist Henry Ford, there were some negative qualities to the man, but there was one major quote that I have had printed out on a beautiful piece of wood, and it's blocked and hammered into the wall of my study. And what did Henry Ford say? If you think you can or you can't, you're right. Let me say it again. If you think you can or you can't, you're right. And his point was dream big. Think of the most audacious things that you can do with your career. If you're a film director, well, you know you want to be the best in your generation. If you're a Wall Street person, you want to have a great professional track record. Or if you're a banker, you want to do the most M&A deals. Dream big, think exponentially, and believe in the value of compounding. And so I tell people, listen, if I gave you a choice between $1,000 a day for 30 days or 1 penny, this magic penny that could double in value every day for 30 days, what would you like? And the counterintuitive answer, of course, is the penny, because the penny goes from 1 to 2 cents. And on the third day, it goes from 2 to 4 cents. And then by the 30th day, it's $5,280,000. So you could have $1,000 a day for 30 days. You could have $30,000. Let's say I said $10,000 a day for 30 days. Let's say I said $100,000 a day for 30 days. Still, the magic penny is flipping and doubling every day and is more than those values. And the point being is you start, you dream big, and you think of your life as a compounding exponential story. Every little layer adds to something. As long as you're off zero and you're starting, you can begin the process of doubling. All right, who's kidding who rejection absolutely sucks? Let me take you to 1975, JoJo's Pizzeria. Through inflation, we just moved from a dime to 25 cents to make a public telephone call. And there I was in the phone booth, JoJo's Pizzeria, Main Street, Port Washington. I was in the 6th grade, and I was going to call a girl at her house. I had looked up her phone number in the phone book. We're talking about how old I am. I'm old as dirt at this point. I picked up the phone, put the quarter in. My heart was pounding. I called the girl's house. I asked for her. When she got on the phone, I said, would you like to go see a movie with me tomorrow? There's a matinee playing at the local theater. You ready? No. Click. I mean, it sucked. I mean, who's kidding? I mean, it was absolutely terrible. I was dejected. I was miserable. But you know what I did? I had another quarter in my pocket. I picked up the phone again. I called her best friend and said, hey, hello, it's Anthony. Would you like to go to a movie with me? No. By the 4th person, I finally got someone to go to the movie with me, okay? Now, it sounds terrible on the face, and it was. It was quite humiliating. But there's a lesson in the story. The story is rejection is part of life. So let me say it again for great emphasis. Rejection is part of life. If you haven't been rejected from somebody or rejected from a job, or your proposal hasn't been rejected, or a potential prospect hasn't said no to you and rejected the idea of you managing their money, or rejected your film proposal, then you're really not living large enough. You're not dreaming big enough. And you've got to get it in your head. If you want to reach your dreams and you want to fulfill your destiny, you got to accept some rejection. You got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Let me say that again. You got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I've been embarrassed. I'm on the front page of the New York Post. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Am I comfortable being uncomfortable? I am. I've been embarrassed. I'm at the top of the ticker from Bloomberg. My fund's down 40%, and people are writing my financial obituary. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, it's uncomfortable. Am I comfortable being uncomfortable? And the answer is yes. Have I always been that way? No, of course not. It's the reason why we're doing this, okay? I want you to get comfortable way earlier in your career than I did. And I want you to learn things from what I'm saying so you don't have to repeat the mistakes that I've made in my life. If you can get some kernels of wisdom out of what I'm saying, learn to be uncomfortable comfortably early in your career. It'll make a very big exponential difference. So I just got done talking a lot about reading and the gift of reading. And one of the things I love reading are quotations. And so there's some great books. The Bartlett Book of Quotations is a big book. I have it on my desk. I sometimes flip through it. There's great books on inspirational quotes, aspirational quotes. Some of the presidents, though, have some unbelievable quotes. So maybe they wrote them, or maybe a speechwriter wrote them for them, but it really doesn't matter. They're just great words to think about and great words to live by. And so one of the greatest quotes from an American president is during the depths of the Depression in March of 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said to the American people in his inaugural address, the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. And when you think about it, when you have a negative feedback loop going on in an economy, people are fearful, they're constraining themselves, they stop spending, you lose the animal spirits of consumption, and it causes this downward cycle. And so the president's point was, let's not be fearful, let's just get re-engaged in the economy. And the great thing about that quote, it was incredibly simplistic. Now, there's more complicated quotes than that, so I'm going to paraphrase those. But his cousin, Teddy Roosevelt, had one of the greatest quotes ever. Richard Nixon used to always talk about this quote, and it's a quote about being in the arena. And Teddy's point was, listen, you know, it's easy to be the critic. It's easy to be a spectator looking at a boxing match or a football game and to critique the players. But think about being in the arena. You've got blood and sweat and tears, and you've got emotion and strain and determination. And by the way, you're out there now. You're out there in the public domain. So if you're failing ingloriously. Of course, if you're winning gloriously. And Teddy's point was, it doesn't matter, just the fact that you're on the field. I said earlier in Module 1, it's the journey. It's not necessarily the destination. But what Roosevelt would say to you, get on the playing field. Be willing to mix it up. Don't care or despair about the critics. It's very easy for the critics that are sitting in the stands. You want to be the doer, accepting and being willing to take the criticism. Another unbelievable quote is from Calvin Coolidge. And Calvin Coolidge was a man of few words, but I think one of his funnier and good quotes about America was the business of America is business, pretty simplistic. But he said something about persistence. He basically said, nothing takes the place of persistence. Brains doesn't take it. Courage doesn't take it. Nothing. Because you could be smart and lazy, forget it. The person persistent is going to beat you like a drum. You could be courageous, but never decide to act. Or you can be courageous and get knocked down a few times and give up. The person that is persistent, that gets up off the mat, is typically the person that does the best. And by the way, every single great entrepreneur has had a setback. Bill Gates, he got the contract for IBM. He was having a problem with the operating system. He had to borrow $30,000 from his dad. He bought an operating system from Digital Research based in Seattle. It was called DR-DOS. He dropped that. He called it MS-DOS, and he got Microsoft restarted. Michael Dell, a legendary business leader, an entrepreneur worth hundreds of billions of dollars. In 1993, his laptops were catching fire on commercial airplanes. Can you believe how horrible that was? The stock went from 41 to 7. It looked like Dell was going to potentially go out of business. He raised a bunch of equity capital. He retooled his manufacturing, and look at where he is today. Jeff Bezos, in 2000, the stock was down 90%. There was a picture of him in Barron's. It said Amazon.bomb, the age of this internet retailer is over. And it was a picture of Jeff inside one of those old-fashioned bombs. Can you imagine? Look at what happened at Amazon. $2.5 trillion market capitalization today. So there's going to be setbacks. Every entrepreneur has to go through these trials and tribulations. But think of what Calvin Coolidge said. If you're persistent, you can outdo the odds against you. So you could go 0 for 9, but just going 1 for 10, that next shot at the plate, is really all you need for the maximum success. So these are some quotes to live by. These are some quotes to think about. Abe Lincoln, another great quote. If I had to chop down a tree, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 6 of them sharpening my axe. So it's a story of preparation and reading and diligence and planning. Lots of great quotes out there, some things to inspire you and help you seek your aspiration. Hey, are you there? I'm speaking directly to you. Okay, you just graduated from college. You probably have a little bit of school debt. You want to make your mom and dad proud, and you're looking for a career. You're looking to get started. So what do you do? Okay, the answers are very, very simple. Make a plan. Remember what Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they're punched in the face. Or Dwight Eisenhower said, everybody's got a plan. Every general's got a plan until they have contact with the enemy. So make a plan. I made a plan. The week I graduated from Harvard Law School, I wrote down everything that I wanted to do. Did I accomplish any of it? Not really. Plans change. You're making a plan and God is laughing. But make a plan. Because what Eisenhower also said is when you make a plan, you're prepared for the adaptation. You put enough thought into the ideas and the plan of your career that you're ready to make a new plan when the time comes. So I guarantee you, and I'm talking right to you, I guarantee no matter how you start, your finish is going to be unexpected. If you said to me the day I graduated from law school 37 years ago, I would have had the career that I've had today, I would have said, no way, that would have never happened. Wouldn't have ventured off into media and television and writing books and doing Wall Street analytics and conferences. I never thought any of that. Would have working in the White House. There's no way. And a lot of great things are going to happen to you, but start with a plan. Get yourself ready for an amazing life. Listen, you're going to be a success. I guarantee you're going to be a success. And there are going to be people snickering at you. They're going to say, oh, that's a lucky SOB, or that's a person that was there in the right place or the right time, and they got lucky. But you're going to know, and I'm going to know, that it wasn't just luck. Sure, there's some luck in the game, and there's some serendipity, but you make your own luck by being present. You make your own luck by trying again after you failed. You make your own luck through your persistence. And that's the dirty little secret that we have between each other, right? What separates the 1% from the 99? The 1% are working just a little bit harder. They're pushing through the pain. They're taking the rejection and laughing about it, using a little bit of humor and self-deprecation, and they're pushing to make things right. That's going to be you. I know it. And one of the best compliments that could ever happen to you is someone says, oh, look at that lucky SOB. This one's called the rejection reframe. And so every time you get a no, particularly the more disturbing ones, I want you to sit down and write 3 or 4 things that you learned about the experience. Something you could have done differently. Were you prospecting improperly? Lots of times the no's are coming from people that are not really the right candidates for the particular project, the sell, the product, and it's a process. So write it down, learn from it, and act on it on your next sale or your next interaction. Take 30 minutes to fully actualize yourself by writing down a personal brand statement. What do you want to be known for? What's your expertise? Why will people come to you to do business? Why will people come to you to build a relationship? What are your thoughts on charity? What are your thoughts on external activities, not just work? Write them all down, shape it and look at it, and evaluate it. Review yourself and compare yourself to your personal brand. Sometimes your personal brand needs to be changed. I started out as a registered investment advisor. I morphed into a hedge fund manager, then an analyst. Now we're doing digital assets. Rewrite, rework your brand. Logos change. Sometimes logos change in the American corporate world. That's beneficial to the corporation, and sometimes there isn't. But be a good experimenter with your own brand. Constantly redefine yourself. Do a self-evaluation once a quarter. This will become the foundation of your authentic style, but also your long-term reputation. So this one's called the First 90-Day Resilience Playbook. So grab any sheet of paper, right at the top, My Resilience Playbook, and commit to doing this for the next 90 days. So choose one proactive networking habit that you'll choose to execute every single week. Could be a phone call, setting up a meeting, a breakfast, a lunch. Write down some accountability sentences for the next time that you make a mistake at work so you have it at the ready. You'll put people off guard if you're willing to make your mistakes known and you're willing to acknowledge them. Okay, this one is called the Man in the Arena moniker. Get a Post-it, think about this course, and think about being in the arena. So what are you going to write on the Post-it? Well, you got to pick it. But for me, it's be present, be a risk taker, and be willing to be in the arena so in the event of something goes good or bad, everything is there. Everything is there in the journey, all the joy. And this is the thing that you're hopefully getting by this time in this course. Even the setbacks are part of that joy. And you put that on the Post-it. Setbacks are part of the joy. The destination is a good thing, but the journey is even better. Write it all down so when you see it on your monitor or you see it in your notebook in the morning, you're like, okay, I can take whatever's going to happen to me today. The good, bad, or the ugly, the indifferent, or the really great. So I'm going to talk to you from two different angles now. I'm going to talk to you as a employer of young people and what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to talk to you about yourself and what you should be looking for. So first thing that I'm looking for is attitude. Number one thing. I'm going to take for granted that you're coming out of college and you don't know the business. You may not know the trade vernacular, the vocabulary of the business, the aspects of the business that we're working on day to day. It may take you 3 to 5 years to get there. But are you trainable? Are you good-natured? Do you have the right attitude? If somebody tells you that the office opens at 7, what time do you think you need to be there? Well, the obvious answer is 6:30. If somebody tells you the office opens at 7:30, get there at 7. You got to get there earlier than everybody else. You got to leave later. You say, well, that's silly. I don't want to be in an office making work or just doing things. It's not it. It's the attitude. You're sending a signal to the people that paid their dues ahead of you. Somebody like me, 37 years in the business, that got to the office at 5 a.m. at Goldman Sachs way back in 1989. I'm seeing in you something that I like. I'm seeing in you the industry, the can-doism, and the willingness to go the extra mile. That's got to be you. It's got to be you. You got to take a notebook out in the morning. You want to really impress your boss? Take a notebook out in the morning. Go to his assistant and say, hey, could I get 15 minutes with the boss once a week? And what do you want to talk to him about? What's in your notebook? You want to ask the boss questions. I heard this. I heard that. I don't understand what it means. Could you give me something to read that could get me up to speed? Could you tell me something about your career that would help me with my career? You want to be that person. You want to be a positive person. You want to be somebody that's always inquiring with an insatiable curiosity. Super, super important to think like that. It's the number one ingredient. It's the number one predictor of success. Another great predictor, perhaps tied for number one, is delayed gratification. Are you the type of person that can delay gratification? There's a very famous study in 1968. They took a group of 5-year-olds at UCLA in the Department of Psychology, and they said, okay, here's the deal. The 5-year-old came in, said, tell you what, you got a choice. You can have one marshmallow right now, or I'm going to go run an errand. I'm going to be back in 5 minutes, and I'll give you 2 marshmallows. What do you want to do? And guess what they did? They tracked the kids. Over a 15-year period of time, the kids that immediately took the marshmallow, they had a harder time in life. They weren't able to delay gratification. They weren't able to put their immediate pleasure aside for something longer lasting or something, frankly, double. You want to be that person. You want to be a person that can delay gratification. You don't need to be the person that goes out early on a Friday to head to the Hamptons. You want to stay late, impress your bosses. Do the extra mile. Do the things that people are not expecting you to do. Now, if I'm coming from your angle, who am I looking for to be my boss? Well, I'm looking for teachers. I'm looking for people that are going to sit me down and they're going to understand that I am not ready for prime time. I wasn't ready for prime time at age 25 when I joined Goldman Sachs 36 short years ago. I wasn't ready for prime time, but I needed people to sit me down, mentor me, train me, teach me the process, teach me the operational process, not just the fun stuff, right? Remember, you want to learn how to read an operational sheet. If you're on Wall Street, you want to learn how to read an operational sheet. If you're a screenwriter in Hollywood, you want to look at how they block off and what the typeset is for screenwriting. And you want to read books like The Seven Plots that explain the antagonist, protagonist stories in human life so that you can identify with them and find new genres to play with. You pick the material. There's lots of sources, and there's a depth of knowledge in every category: medicine, law, business, entertainment, marketing. There are people before you that have done the work. Go learn from those people, and you want to attach yourself to the real teachers in life. You don't want to attach yourself to the barkers who are going to demean you for no reason, but the people that are really willing to help you with your career. I always tell younger people that work with me, I want you to be better than me at the same age. I want you to make more money, and I want you to be prolific. If they feel that good about the place, they'll work with purpose, and they'll stay for long periods of time. So everybody says you got to make a first impression. You got 30 seconds to make the first impression. You're sitting down in the interview, got to make the first impression. Well, let me let you in on something. I suck at first impressions. Number one, I think my first mother-in-law told me I had an elocution problem. I didn't even know what that meant. I had to go look it up. And then number two, I didn't dress right for my interviews. So I walked into Goldman Sachs. I was in 100% polyester, had a polyester suit, polyester tie. And so everybody says, oh, first impressions, you got to make a great first impression. You got 30 seconds and so on and so forth. That may be true. It was never true in my case. I always made a horrible first impression. And then finally I had somebody call me up and say, you're a nice kid or you're a smart kid, but you're like the worst dressed person that we've ever met. So I'm going to give you some advice. The cliche is first impressions matter, dress right, articulate yourself, read up on the people that you're going to interview with and so on and so forth. And I accept all that and I agree with all that. But even if you flub the first impression, go for a second and third impression. Because you know what impresses people? Your willingness to make an unending amount of impressions. Okay, people are looking for the persistence. I hear the big deal about first impressions, but I don't want you to be shell-shocked or overly uptight when you're in the job interview worrying about your first impression. Be yourself. If it doesn't work out the first time, have at it again. We've covered a lot of ground in this course. We started with your mindset, the internal foundation for everything else. We talked about your reputation, how to build it, how to protect it, and how to rebuild it when you get knocked down. We laid out the rules of engagement, the daily discipline that separates the top 1%, and we showed you how to build a real network based on value and reciprocity. But I want to leave you with this. This course isn't a trophy you put on a shelf. It's a set of tools you need to use every single day. An amazing career isn't built in a single moment. It's built in the small daily choices. The choice to make that one extra call. The choice to take risks to talk to people. To own mistakes instead of hiding them. The choice to learn something from everyone you meet. The choice to get up off the mat every single time. That's where the growth happens, and that's what defines success. That's how you build a career and a life of meaning that you can be proud of. The playbook is now in your hands. The rest is up to you. Take these tools, go build something incredible, and I hope to see you victorious on the front page of the Wall Street Journal someday.